Hi guys, so I wanted to show you this interview. It's actually just a recording, it's not an actual video, but we can listen to it anyway. It's between Talk Radio and Brendan O'Neill. So Brendan O'Neill is someone who likes attention and he likes to gain as much of it as possible. So he says controversial things in order to gain attention. So I don't recommend you actually check him out, but if you want, you'll become extremely frustrated with him because he doesn't base his world on reality. He bases it on opinion, and he likes his opinion and he doesn't like other people's opinions. But let's hear what he has to say here.
Appears to be working the other way round right now, though. In terms of people appreciating our families is one thing, people appreciating the BBC perhaps another, certainly from the government. The government cabinet minister Oliver Dowden, the culture secretary, has written an open letter to the head of the BBC accusing them of bias after a Panorama show last week asked, has the government failed the NHS? And every single NHS worker they found to speak out about the shortages of PPE just happened, quite by chance, to be a staunch Labour activist, not someone who just...
Sorry, can you please explain to me what a staunch Labour activist is? Because I don't understand the difference between a Labour activist and a staunch Labour activist. And how did you determine that these people were staunch Labour activists? Is there like a level that you get to? Well, you are a Labour activist, but you are a staunch Labour activist, and here is your medal. Okay, but this is irrelevant to the actual discussion we're going to have here, because these people presented facts. Now, whether you like or don't like the people who present the facts, unfortunately, it doesn't change the facts. So you're criticizing these people and the BBC, of course, because they presented facts and the government didn't like these facts. I recommend you watch the video. From Panorama. One of the facts they presented, and it was the most shocking, was there was a box of PPE masks, and the person showing the box pulled back the label, and under the label it showed best before 2019. Then they pulled off the label again, and it showed best before 2016. So this was shocking. NHS staff are being forced to use PPE that is out of date. And not just that it's out of date, but that they were presented with stuff that was in date. But in reality, it was out of date because somebody had lied to them. Somebody had stuck another label on it to hide the fact that it was out of date. Now, I don't care if the person presenting this is a Labour supporter or a staunch Labour supporter or a Tory supporter or a Brexit Party supporter. What I care about is the fact. I don't care, once again, about the political opinions of people. I care about the facts.
Supported Labour, no problem with that, but a staunch Labour activist. And of course, this wasn't told to the viewers. Well, we're going to talk...
Okay, so this wasn't told to the viewers. But when there's a debate on Brexit, for example, and there are people in the audience who are members of the Brexit Party and supporters, maybe even staunch supporters of the Brexit Party or the Conservative Party, this isn't told to the public either. But I assume you have a problem with that. Or maybe you don't have a problem with that. So you're starting this discussion by saying, I have a problem with people presenting facts if they have a political bias. Well, only if the political bias is the opposite to my political bias. Who actually listens to this lady, Julia? Apart from me, who's doing it now, but who thinks this person is credible? Who thinks this person is a valuable voice to hear? She starts off by saying, we shouldn't listen to the facts because they're coming from someone who has a political bias. But when the political bias is something that I support, then we don't criticize that at all.
About that and a few other topics as well with our next guest, editor of Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill. Good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia.
No, I mean, but BBC bashing is a very popular thing. Look, I've done a lot of work for the BBC over the years. There's lots of things I like about the BBC, so I'm going to hold that out there. That said, I think I
Could you give an example?
like you, was taking quite a lot of umbrage at the BBC during the Brexit coverage in terms of, I thought, blatant open bias, and I think that's when they lost a lot of the nation.
When she says blatant bias, she doesn't mean, or she doesn't want you to think that she means that they were pro-Brexit. No, that her idea is that the BBC were anti-Brexit, even though they had Nigel Farage on TV almost every night. And Nigel Farage was on TV presenting opinions. This is the problem I have once again. If Nigel Farage was on TV presenting facts, then I wouldn't have a problem with Nigel Farage being on TV. Look, honestly, you probably know my opinion on Nigel Farage. Okay, I don't like Nigel Farage. I completely disagree with him. I think he's a charlatan and a fake. But if he's presenting a fact, then he has every right to present it. But if he's there to present his opinion, that's completely different. And Nigel Farage was on TV, on not just on TV, but on the BBC, constantly in the run-up to the referendum, the Brexit referendum, and after also. He was on TV almost all the time. And he was always asked his opinion about stuff, and he was given a complete and utter open platform, and he was never challenged on it. Nigel Farage said things like, oh, when we leave the European Union, we'll be able to have a deal like Switzerland. Well, that was a lie. He knew it was a lie, but he still said it. Oh, when we leave the European Union, we'll be able to have a deal with like Norway, or like Canada, or like whatever other countries he spewed out that he knew was a lie. He said we'll remain part of the customs union. Well, that was a lie. Or he didn't know. Well, if he didn't know, he shouldn't have said it. Once again, it was an opinion. It was either an opinion or it was a lie. Then he said things like, they need us more than we need them. The German car industry was another example. They'll run to Merkel and demand that they give us a good deal. Or maybe it wasn't the German car industry, but it was other industries in France, in Italy, in Germany. They would run to their government leaders and demand to give Britain a good deal. That's the sort of things he was saying. So this information was either wrong or it was a lie. In either case, Nigel Farage had no reason to be on the BBC. But the BBC were giving him an open platform constantly, and you're saying that the BBC was biased against Brexit.
When they decided to basically become, the Ramona BBC, and I think that's when they lost a lot.
So you cannot really. This is. I know this sounds like low-hanging fruit here. As soon as somebody starts with and this is someone who has a huge platform. This person has a radio station, and they're starting with the words Ramona. Automatically, I understand if you're saying things like Ramona, then you're not interested in having a proper debate. Because you're automatically poisoning the well. You're starting off by saying anything that the other people have to say is automatically wrong, and I'm going to start by poisoning the well by saying these people have a bias, or these people are not interested in the facts or things like this before we even start.
A lot of trust. In terms of this Panorama, the fact that a government minister has actually written sort of complaining about it to the head of the BBC, how significant is that?
Very significant.
Why would it be significant? Who gives a crap whether a government minister writes to the BBC or not? Honestly, I don't care. They got offended. To hell with their offence. I care about facts. If the Panorama programme presents facts, I don't care if a government minister is upset about it or offended about it. Who gives a crap if the government minister writes about this? Do you think, well, if a member of the cabinet writes, then it must be serious. There mustn't be really facts in that report if the government minister is writing.
It's unprecedented, I think, for such a high-level intervention into this kind of discussion. I defend press freedom completely.
Yes, you do, Brendan. Yes, yeah, you are a staunch supporter of the journalist, as the intrepid journalist going in there and getting that story, finding the facts and displaying them to the public, because that's what the public need to know. And to hell with what the governments say, to hell with what opinion is. I want to see the facts. But
I think we have to have absolute press freedom. So it makes me instinctively uncomfortable when government ministers write to media outlets. Having said that, the BBC, I think, is behaving badly at the moment. I agree with you. During the Brexit era, it effectively became the Brexit-bashing corporation.
Okay, can you please give some examples of that? Unfortunately, in this recording, they don't give any examples. They just present their opinion. Well, my opinion is that the BBC was bashing Brexit all the time. But I'm not going to give you any examples or any evidence to support that, because it's just an opinion. Oops, I said too much. If they had Nigel Farage on almost all the time, if they had members of the ERG on, if they had Boris Johnson on, if they had Ian Duncan Smith on Sunday mornings almost every frigging week, talking about how great Brexit will be, how the European Union is close to finishing, how the European Union is dying for Britain to remain part of the European Union, how other European Union countries are clamouring for the door because Britain is going to leave, and it's going to be a bright new sunlit uplands for Britain, and everyone else is like, oh my God, look what Britain is doing, we need to go there as well. And when reality instead was the opposite, where support for the European Union in polls within European citizens went up, not down, after Brexit. After the referendum, support for the European Union in many European countries, in all European countries as far as I know, went up. So this idea that it was the BBC were bashing Brexit all the time. How were they bashing Brexit if they were putting Brexiteers on TV all the time? Brexiteer is not an insult. Brexiteers call themselves Brexiteers. Okay, let's change the word. Brexit supporters. Constantly on the BBC, on TV, all the time. Nigel Farage was the head honcho of the whole lot. He was always on TV. And he was never challenged on anything, because everything he presented was an opinion. How can you challenge Nigel Farage on an opinion? He wasn't presenting facts. Once again, if Nigel Farage was presenting facts, I don't have a problem with that. But he was not. He was presenting his opinion.
It was one of the key promoters of Project Fear. It gave a very skewed view of what was going on in the country.
But what they were presenting was information that was given or leaked by the government. How was it Project Fear if it was information that was in the public domain? If they said, this is what's going to happen if we do this, and here is the expert who's going to explain it. That's how it was. It wasn't some guy going, like me, going, well, I think what's going to happen is blah, blah, blah. And, well, I don't have any evidence because it's just my opinion. That's not how the BBC works. I know that's how you would like it to work, but in the opposite. So you'd have someone like talk radio idiots pulled off that show and put on the BBC to just tell the public what the government want them to believe, like Fox News in America. That's what you would like, and probably you would be hoping to get a position there.
About Brexit and so on. And I think during the COVID crisis, it has let itself down too. That Panorama show was, in my view, it was a dishonest instance of campaigning journalism.
So we're 2.5 minutes, almost 2.5 minutes in, and still we haven't heard any facts. So you're criticizing Panorama for political campaigning. You're not criticizing the facts. See, this is extremely telling. When these individuals, I don't even know what to call them, are they journalists? I think it's insulting to call these people journalists, because they're not interested in facts. They're not interested in presenting facts. They're interested in presenting their opinions. But isn't it interesting that they jump to, well, we can't respond to the fact, so we'll attack the people who are presenting the facts. It's the equivalent of if I said something and you criticize me and YouTube, but you don't actually criticize the thing that I said. If I said the capital city of France is Paris, and you don't criticize the fact that the capital city is Paris, but you criticize me and you criticize YouTube. That's basically what is happening here. And unfortunately, many people buy into that. People will say, yeah, the problem is YouTube, or the problem is Max. Max is the problem, not the fact that Paris is the capital of Paris is the capital of France. That's not the main issue here. The main issue is Max is presenting this information, and Max has a bias. We all know Max's bias, and we all know that maybe because YouTube is giving Max a platform, that means that they agree with him.
It presented itself as a neutral program about real events and about real problems, but it actually came off more like a campaigning journalism.
What he's attempting to do here is he's attempting to present an unrealistic scenario, but the way he's presenting it, it sounds as something reasonable. So what he's playing at, he doesn't really believe it because he's a charlatan and he's a hack. He's more a hack than a charlatan. He has his own opinion. He's a right-winger. He's a conservative. So he would like the BBC to be more like that. He's a Brexit supporter. He wants the BBC more. I don't know how much more you want them to move to support Brexit if they're allowing Nigel Farage on almost every day. But he wants it more in that direction. Or he wants at least to pretend that it's neutral, but in that direction. But so what he's doing is he's presenting this idea that, well, what's wrong with having a neutral BBC? If it's neutral, that's good. And that sounds good. But the BBC is made up of people. Now, people have their biases. I have my biases. If you're a subscriber, if you've been watching some of my videos, you know very clearly what my biases are. And I don't have a problem pointing out my biases. I say what they are. I'll defend them. But I never say that they're facts. I say that they're my biases. Now, if you're working for the BBC, you have biases. Everyone has biases. Anyone who says they don't have biases is lying, because we all have biases. Now, what's important is when you're presenting facts, that the biases don't get in the way. And a good journalist doesn't allow the bias to get in the way of the fact. Now, these people are not journalists because they don't care about the facts. They just care about their opinion. They have their biases, and that's as far as they go. They don't actually care about facts. I actually care about facts. And I try not to allow my biases to get in the way, but I'm not a journalist. But I think journalism is a very important part of our society that should be defended. It's extremely important. But once again, these people are not journalists. They're opinionists. They have their opinion, and that's as far as it goes. But they will criticize people who present facts because the facts go against their opinion or their narrative. And I think it's very important that people see that. It doesn't matter whether it's on the left or on the right. If someone on the left is presenting their opinion and using their opinion to morph the facts, to distort the facts, then I'm going to call that out. I think it's wrong. The facts will stand or fall on their own merit. They don't need someone to embellish them. They don't need someone to twist them into shape. I prefer to hear the facts as they are. I understand that the person presenting the facts may have a bias, but it's important that the facts are looked at, not the bias. But you're not capable of doing that because you don't care.
These were people with particular political views, very anti-Boris, very anti-government, pushing forward an apocalyptic vision of the problems with PPE and other things.
Okay, this is now really, really pissing me off. Because the people who are going to suffer if they don't have the proper PPE are the people in the Panorama program. Doctors, nurses, care assistants, ambulance drivers, people working in nursing homes, whatever. These are the people who are going to suffer if they don't have the right equipment. You're not going to suffer. You're more upset that they are presenting an opinion that you don't agree with. You're more interested in having, because they have, what did I say? I said opinion. You're worried that you don't like the fact that they're presenting information that you don't like. Now, whether this information is correct or not, we should investigate. But we have seen it. But you're not criticizing the information because you know it's correct. But instead, you're pointing your finger at the people who are presenting the information.
The BBC should have been more honest about what it was doing, and I completely understand the government's anger at the BBC at the moment.
And again, it's this.
So you're just a hack. I understand the government's anger at the BBC. Once again, at no point did you say the information that the BBC Panorama program presented was wrong. At no point have you or this other idiot haven't said it at any stage. The information they presented was wrong. The information such as opening a box that had a label on it that said best before 2019, and when the label was removed, it said 2016. Members of the NHS are expected to work with out-of-date material. But you don't have a problem with that. You have a problem with them having a political bias.
There's nothing wrong with somebody being anti-government.
Yes, there is, in your opinion. You've spent the last 2.5 minutes explaining why you have a problem with these people. And now you're saying, well, there's nothing wrong with it. But let's listen what else she has to say.
Anti-Tory, anti-Boris, anti-Brexit, or whatever it is.
So you're saying there's nothing wrong with being anti-Tory, anti-Boris, or whatever.
But the key thing is under the...
But... I'm not criticising the but you don't say there's nothing wrong with being anti-Tory or pro-Tory. There's nothing wrong with being anti-Corbyn or pro-Corbyn. But you notice that she's only able to think in one way. Anti-Tory is bad, pro-Tory is good. So there's nothing wrong with thinking in a bad way. I don't care whether someone is pro-Tory or anti-Tory. I care about the facts. You don't. I'm sorry to be repeating myself like a broken record here, but these people don't understand journalism. They don't understand facts. No, actually, I take that back. They do understand it, but they're attempting to circumvent the facts because they disagree politically. Not even they disagree politically, because the facts show their team up badly. This is what it's about. I'm part of a team. Julie is part of the Tory team. Brendan is part of the Tory team. And we'll defend the team even if the team is doing stupid crap, is putting people's lives in danger. We don't care about that. We are here to defend the team. And we'll throw crap at the other team even if the other team is doing well or doing the right thing, because we have to defend our team. It's absolutely disgusting, this. It really drives me insane. Because you should be looking at what the information is. You should be looking at what the facts are. If the facts show that your team is doing crap, then you should be calling out your team. Not calling out the people pointing out the fact. This damages all of us. Damages every society. When you have these types of charlatans and hacks pointing the finger at the people who are presenting the facts.
The BBC's own regulations, they actually have more sort of rules and regulations of how they broadcast than even other independent broadcast media. We're all governed by Ofcom, but they have extra rules about being...
And that's good, because they're not hacks.
Very open about people's biases. So, for instance, pointing out that if someone is outside of the election period, if someone has been or is going to be a political candidate, and pointing out people's allegiances. And this isn't to undermine. Someone could be very anti-Tory, very staunch, staunch Corbynista. It doesn't mean that what they've got to say isn't worth hearing. It isn't correct.
And now you're going to contradict all of what you've just said.
But the point is, it's for the viewer to make up their own mind, and you can't make up your own mind if you're not given full information.
It's not about the viewer making up their own mind. Why do you think it's about the viewer making up their own mind? The BBC is presenting information. It's not about getting people to make up their own mind. What are you talking about? It's like if they said there was a car accident today, but it's up to we'll leave it up to you to imagine if the person driving was drunk or not drunk, or the person driving was going too fast or not too fast, or the person who was hit by this car was looking at their phone. We'll leave it all up to you. That's the problem with leaving it up to people. We don't leave it up to people. We present facts.
That's exactly right. And, we know that the BBC has made a few faux pas in this crisis. For example, they reported that the head of an NHS trust was asking Burberry to help provide PPE, but it later turned out that he wasn't the head of an NHS trust, and the BBC had to apologise.
So the BBC presented factually incorrect information, and then the BBC apologised for it. And you have a problem with that. This is your evidence of, look, the BBC makes a mistake, huh? Okay. The BBC presented information that was wrong, and it corrected it. I'm still, do we have to wait for talk radio to present information that's wrong and then correct it? Has Julia ever presented information that was wrong and then said, I'm sorry, what I said last week about Nigel Farage saying X, Y, and Z, it actually wasn't true, and I'd like to correct the record here. Even I have a small YouTube channel, and when I make mistakes, I attempt to correct it. If I say some stupid crap, I'll make a response video after and apologize and explain, look, I'm sorry for what I said, this is the correct information. It's not because I want to win support or seem cool or something, because I care about the facts. These people don't care about the facts.
The BBC has got to be very careful because they are looked upon by the public as the neutral purveyor of actual news. If you want to know what's happening, you think to yourself, I'll turn to the BBC. If the BBC becomes more biased, if it allows its anti-Boris sentiment to take over its reporting and to pull...
Once again, he has no evidence of this. Once again, I've said members of the BBC will have their biases. But what's important is the bias doesn't influence or affect the fact. What you would like is to have a so-called neutral BBC. One where anything happens, where people don't have biases, but that doesn't exist.
Pollute its reporting. Everyone will suffer as a consequence of that. So I think it's absolutely right to keep the BBC on its toes and to call them out when we think they are behaving in an overly political way.
So once again, it's about politics. It's not about what they actually said. So you're disagreeing with them because they presented the government in a bad light. They presented your team in a bad light. You don't care about what the information was. You care about defending your team.
And this is the thing, isn't it? That there was a real opportunity for the BBC to redeem itself, as you say, as a neutral.
This is poisoning the well. She's starting off with saying the BBC have a problem with bias, and now they should try to redeem themselves. They don't have a problem with bias. If you want to criticize the BBC on bias, it's not about being anti-government or anti-Brexit. It could be in the direction of being pro-government and pro-Brexit. But I don't think it's actually a bias. I think the problem is they allow everyone on. The problem is that they give equal balance to both sides. And when there should not be an equal balance on both sides. And what I mean by this is they would, for example, they could put on a climate scientist who has years and years of study, who has a PhD in numerous fields, who has written papers on climate-related science. And then on the other side, they would have a politician, or they would have some guy who runs a blog, or they would have somebody who's receiving funding from an oil company. And they would present both of them. They would give them equal amount of time. And they would say, well, see, we're balanced. But that's not balance. That's being neutral. And there's a big difference between being neutral and being balanced. Being balanced would be saying, okay, we have a climate scientist here and we have a climate scientist here who disagree with each other on the facts. That would be balanced. We had the same with Brexit. On one side you have Nigel Farage, and then you have another politician on the other side. But Nigel Farage is not checked on what he says. Nigel Farage is able to give his opinion about the UK being like Switzerland after Brexit, or being like Norway, or the European Union need us more than we need them. All lies, all factually incorrect information, but he was never challenged on it because they were afraid that it would affect the balance. It would affect neutrality. Maybe give him one or two hardball questions, but the rest would be softball questions to maintain neutrality. But neutrality is not should not be the driving force. It should be balance. And balance does not look like climate scientist and flat earther. That's not how it works.
Purveyor of news. I wonder though whether the BBC is even able to do that now. We all know. I mean, one of my favourite things in the world as a Brexiteer is watching back the footage of the BBC announcement that Brexit had won, Leave had won over Remain, and the faces of everyone in the BBC newsroom who it wasn't just they were unhappy. They'd never met anyone who voted for Brexit.
They never met anyone who voted for Brexit. They never met Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage wasn't there almost every friggin' night. They never met members of the ERG. They never met Boris Johnson. They never met Brexiteers. So really, I struggle with people like this. She's saying this. No, she's either saying this in two ways. She's saying this information that's factually incorrect. Is she saying it because she doesn't know? Or because she's lying? If she's saying it because she doesn't know, then she has some serious problems. Because 3 years ago was not that long ago. Almost 4 years now. 4 years ago. 2016. It's not that long ago. But also, Nigel Farage was on TV also up until last year. So it's not some distant memory. It's last year. Brexiteers were on TV all the time saying about how much the EU need the UK more than the UK need the EU. How German car industries would come running to Merkel, and industries in France and Germany and France and Italy would put pressure on their governments to support a good deal with the UK. How everyone else was clamouring again for the door to get out from the European Union, when in reality things were the opposite.
And so they were just totally surprised it could happen. Do you think there's a case that actually the BBC culture now, and this one thought culture, Guardianista, Remain, Labour, Lib Dems, and it is now so absolutely just stuck in the mud on this, that it's impossible to change that culture. Do you think this is the beginning and the end of the BBC? Because there'll be a lot of people like me. I'd like to keep lots of aspects of the BBC. I'd like them to get down to just back to some, a tighter version of themselves that costs a lot less.
Colson, this is very, very, very telling. This is the same type of rhetoric you're going to hear regarding the NHS. The BBC costs too much money. We need to reduce it. We should make it profit-driven. I can guarantee you now, I'm making a prediction, I'll put money on the table. When this crisis is over, this health crisis is over, I can guarantee you that the people like this lady and this other charlatan, this hack, will be promoting the idea of a privatized NHS. I can guarantee it. Once the dust settles, it will be, maybe we should actually have a private healthcare system in England. In Scotland, I don't think it will fly. In Northern Ireland, I'm not sure. In Wales either. But in England, for sure, it will be, we need to have a private healthcare system. Similar to what they have in the United States, but maybe we don't broadcast that too loudly because they have some issues. But it will be the NHS, the same NHS that these people are clapping for today, they will be selling it off tomorrow. I can guarantee it. I will put money on the table for that now. They will be promoting selling it off. And the same people who come to this channel and criticize me about what I'm saying now will be promoting selling off the NHS in a few months' time or in a year's time. I can guarantee it. Because these people are team players. They support the team. If the Conservative Party decide we quote-unquote love the NHS, they will say we love the NHS too because the team said so. Then after a year, now the NHS sucks, we need to sell it off. Oh, we need to sell it off because the team said so.
I don't want people going to prison for not buying their BBC licence fee and things like that. But do you think they are irredeemably lost now in terms of the culture think that they're in?
I fear that they are. In my darker moments, I think the BBC might be a lost cause now because they've gone so far down the road of becoming, as you say, Ramona, Guardianista, having all those views that you see in certain sections of society, which are not reflective of general public.
These people criticise the London bubble, the Guardian, the Ramoners. They're all interlinked. But do they not understand that people in Scotland don't read the Guardian, and they believe it's a good idea for the UK to remain in the European Union? Do they understand that there are people in Northern Ireland, and to maybe a lesser extent in Wales as well, that they believe that actually we're not middle class, champagne socialist Guardian readers, but we actually care that our future is going in the wrong direction under Brexit? There's this fake image that's created of people who believe that the European Union is something worth being part of. And it's part of this narrative of the Brexit supporters that everyone who cares about staying in the European Union is a middle class professional living in London who gets their breakfast in Starbucks every day, or spends more money on coffee than most people spend on rent.
Opinion, which are not reflective of how the general public thinks. One of the problems is that the BBC, like much of the media, increasingly draws its members of staff and its leaders and everyone else from a particular section of society. They tend to have the same views. They're very sniffy about Brexit. They think
because these people who they hire are qualified.
I think Boris is
the people who are working for the BBC have qualified. They have university degrees. And they happen to think in the same way regarding the European Union. The more people seem to understand about the European Union, the more they seem to think that it's a good idea. The less you know about the European Union, the lower your opinion of the European Union is, and the UK's role in it. Most of the information that Brexiteers have is wrong information, or it's lacking in information. Brexiteers have been told about bendy bananas and about European armies and about anything that Nigel Farage was throwing in their direction. They would lap it up. They wouldn't actually think critically and say, okay, Nigel Farage has this bias. Nigel Farage is presenting this information. Let me look at the information to see if it's actually true. Normally somebody who has, not always, unfortunately, but in most cases, the higher the level of education, generally, the higher the critical thinking skills. The lower the level of education, the lower the critical thinking skills. And in many cases, I'm not saying all cases, but in many cases, most cases, Brexiteers had zero critical thinking skills. So you would like the BBC to hire more people with lower critical thinking skills. You want basically drones to do the work. And I mean bees, not the ones that fly around. You don't want thinking individuals. You want yes men. You want soldiers. You want people who just follow orders.
Basically evil.
Sorry, and you are the one who allegedly thinks journalism is important and freedom of expression and freedom of journalism is important. Okay.
And when you have that, when you create a political momentum in a news organisation like the BBC, you create so many problems. So I increasingly think
they don't have these problems, but you have 6 minutes in and you still haven't presented an example of a political problem in the BBC. I have presented the idea, and I think it's a fact, that everyone has a bias. And I said what's important is that a journalist, a good journalist, doesn't allow the bias to influence the facts. Now, if you think this is the facts are being influenced by the bias, first of all, you have to present that as evidence, and then you have to criticize the facts. Because if you say the facts are wrong because this person has presented them in the wrong way, then we can look at that. But you haven't done that. You said, let's ignore the facts and let's just look at what this person's political opinion is on other things.
BBC does some wonderful things, but I really think that as a new...
Sorry, and this really annoys me this time. Yeah, the BBC do wonderful things, yeah, but I'm not going to give any examples because that would undermine my narrative.
News outlet as the station that tells us what's happening in the world, I think it has compromised itself, and it will be definitely incredibly hard for it to recover its old reputation.
Let me ask you also about something else that's emerging. A lot of people have...
Okay, and I'm just going to stop there because this has gone on much longer than I expected. But this is just really disgusting because you have these two hacks, these two charlatans, ignoring the reality. And unfortunately, that reality is going to impact many people's lives. The people who are complaining about the problem are doing it not for some political motivation. Maybe some of them are. But I don't care. I care about the fact. The fact is that the PPE is not fit for purpose. Some of it is out of date. Some of it is wrong. And instead of responding to the problem, the government instead criticized the messenger, the BBC. And you are here to defend the criticism of the messenger, not the actual problem. And that's why you are beyond disgusting. You're happy to throw people who are on the front line under a bus. The same people that you would tell people, go out and clap for these people. Why? Because a clap doesn't cost you anything. But it does cost you something by holding the government to account, your team to account. This team mentality is it's destructive because it allows hacks to defend charlatans, to defend people who are making not just mistakes, but doing real damage. The lack of PPE is doing real damage to citizens. It's doing real damage to doctors, members of the NHS. And you are here defending the government. Not because the government is right, but because they're wrong. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. Once again, I apologize for the length of this video. The original video is like 6 minutes, but I had to speak about this because it really, really annoyed me. You have these people who either don't care or don't know. And honestly, I don't know which is worse. Why not become a Patreon and enjoy access to our Discord server where we share news, chat, and have some fun? If you become a patron, you can also make video suggestions on topics that are important to you. Check it out via the link in the description.